January 26th, 1966. Australia Day. Glenelg Beach, South Australia. A public holiday, a heat wave, and a beach filled with families. 3 siblings leave home that morning with bus fare and instructions to return by noon. By evening, the beach empties. The buses keep running. No struggle is reported. No crime scene is found. 3 children vanish together in daylight. How does that happen without anyone seeing it happen? Post-war Australia still carries a sense of shared confidence. Neighborhoods operate on familiarity. Children move through public spaces without constant supervision, not as an exception but as a norm. In beachside suburbs like Glenelg, this trust is part of daily life. The beach is not a destination that requires planning. It is an extension of the neighborhood, a place children are expected to know how to navigate on their own. The Beaumont family lives at 109 Harding Street in Somerton Park, a short distance from the shoreline. The house is modest, practical, and lived in. On the morning of January 26, 1966, the windows are open to let in air that barely moves. A heat wave has settled over Adelaide. The temperature is already climbing, and it is not yet mid-morning. Grant Beaumont is not home. A former serviceman turned taxi driver, he is away on a 3-day sales trip to Snowtown. His absence is routine. The household has adapted to it. Nancy Beaumont manages the morning alone, as she often does. She moves between rooms with familiarity, preparing for a public holiday with no school and no scheduled obligations. Jane Beaumont sits at the table, watching more than speaking. At 9 years old, she carries herself with a seriousness that her parents recognize. She is shy, careful, and accustomed to being responsible. Arnna, 7, moves restlessly, crossing the room and doubling back without purpose. Grant, 4, trails behind her, stopping when she stops, following when she moves. The children know Glenelg Beach. It is not treated as a special outing. They have been there many times before, often together, often without adults. They know the bus route. They know the stop. They know when to come home. As the heat builds, the children ask their mother if they can go to the beach again. The request is casual, not pleaded. Nancy considers the temperature and the distance. Walking is unreasonable in this heat. The bus is not. She agrees. Nancy reaches into her purse and counts out the money deliberately. 6 shillings and 6 pence. She places the coins into Jane's hand, not Arnna's, not Grant's. Jane closes her fingers around them. "You come back on the noon bus," Nancy says. Jane looks up. "We will." There is no negotiation. No reminder is needed. The children gather what they need and step outside together. The door closes behind them. The street is already bright. Their shadows fall short on the pavement as they walk toward the bus stop. At 8:45 a.m., the bus arrives. The driver knows the route well. The children climb aboard together and take their seats. The journey lasts 5 minutes, 3 kilometers, a distance so familiar it barely registers as travel. They are seen arriving at Glenelg safely. They step off the bus into a beach already filling with families. Towels are being laid out. Children are running ahead of parents. The atmosphere is relaxed, unhurried, ordinary. Back at Harding Street, the house settles into quiet. Nancy returns to what she was doing before. The morning continues as expected. Nothing feels unresolved. Nothing suggests urgency. Days earlier, a remark had passed through the house without weight. Arnna had mentioned that Jane had got a boyfriend down the beach. Nancy had smiled and dismissed it as childish phrasing, the kind children use to describe a new playmate. The comment had not stayed with her. It did not seem important enough to hold on to. Now, as the children disappear into the crowd at Glenelg, that remark remains where it was left, unexamined, insignificant, filed away among dozens of others that never become anything more. The children move toward the sand together. Jane turns once, briefly, as if checking that Arnna and Grant are still close. They are. They walk forward without hesitation. The routine morning begins. By late morning, Glenelg Beach is crowded enough that individual movements no longer stand out. Families cluster under umbrellas. Children weave between groups, moving freely from sand to grass and back again. The sound of radios and conversation blends into a constant background. No one is counting how many children belong to which adults. This is how the beach functions on public holidays. Jane Beaumont keeps Arnna and Grant within sight without holding their hands. She watches where they go, turning her head often, a habit that comes from being the eldest rather than from any sense of danger. Arnna runs ahead, stops, waits, then runs again. Grant follows more slowly, distracted by the waterline, crouching to touch the wet sand before standing back up. Witnesses later struggle to remember the exact moment the man joined them. He does not arrive dramatically. He does not interrupt. He is simply there, sitting near the children's belongings, positioned comfortably, as if he belongs in the space. He is tall, with fair to light brown hair, a thin face, and skin darkened by the sun. His build is medium, tending toward athletic. He appears to be in his mid-30s. He wears swim trunks. Nothing about his appearance draws attention. The children interact with him easily. They talk to him. They move around him without hesitation. From a distance, the group looks like many others scattered across the beach. The children are not pulled close. They are not restrained. They play. At Kali Reserve, the grassy area beside the beach, several witnesses see the children with the man. They are running, stopping, laughing. The man joins in without directing them. He does not raise his voice. He does not issue commands. He lets Jane take the lead, responding when she speaks, rather than speaking over her. One witness later recalls thinking it was unusual how comfortable the children seemed. Not frightened, not shy. At the time, the thought does not linger. Children often attach themselves to adults they know, or adults they believe they know. The man approaches a woman sitting nearby. He gestures toward the towels on the ground where the children have left their belongings. "Have you seen anyone near their things?" he asks. She looks down at the towels, then back at him. "No, McStaff. They had some money," he says. "It's missing." She shakes her head. "I didn't see anything." The exchange lasts only seconds. The man does not argue. He does not accuse anyone nearby. He nods once and steps away. The tone of the conversation suggests concern, not suspicion. No one around them intervenes. Shortly afterward, the man tells the children he is going to change clothes. The instruction is simple. "I'll be back in a minute," he says. Jane nods. Arnna sits down on the grass. Grant crouches near the towel, picking at the edge. The children wait where they are told to wait. Minutes pass. No one asks why they are waiting for an adult who is not clearly their parent. In the context of the day, the behavior does not violate expectations. When the man returns, witnesses later recall that he looks slightly different, though no one can describe exactly how. The change is not striking enough to fix itself in memory. He gathers the children's belongings. The group stands together, then begins walking away from the beach. They move in the direction of Jetty Road. Police will later estimate the time at around 12:15 p.m. At that moment, it is simply late morning edging into midday. The street is busy. Shops are open. People move at a relaxed pace. As they walk, another witness notices the group. The children are close together. The man walks beside them, not ahead, not behind. The children do not resist. There are no signs of force. No one hears raised voices. A short time later, Daphne Gregory notices the children again. They are still with the man. She later recalls that he is carrying an airline bag similar to one owned by Jane. The detail registers because it looks like it belongs to one of the children. At the time, it does not seem alarming. Adults often carry children's bags. Throughout the morning, the children are seen multiple times by different people. Each sighting confirms the same thing. The children appear calm. They are not crying. They are not asking for help. They are not trying to get away. The man remains consistent in appearance and demeanor. What no one sees is the moment when the situation turns irreversible. There is no clear boundary crossed, no sudden change in behavior. The transition from ordinary to catastrophic does not announce itself. By the time the group disappears from view, they have done so openly, in public, without drawing attention. The beach continues operating as it always has. Children continue playing. Families continue arriving. The children have not been taken by force. They have walked away, and the stranger blends into the crowd. Jetty Road carries the rhythm of a holiday late morning. Shops remain open. Foot traffic moves steadily in both directions. The air is thick with heat, but there is no urgency in how people walk. This is not a place where time feels dangerous. It is a place where time feels generous. Jane Beaumont steps into Wenzel's Bakery on Mosley Street, with Arnna and Grant close behind her. The bell above the door rings, sharp enough to cut through the low hum of conversation inside. The smell of baked pastry fills the narrow space. The counter is familiar. The shopkeeper looks up and recognizes the children immediately. "Hello, Jane," he says. Jane steps forward without hesitation. She knows where to stand. She looks up at the display and points. "2 pasties," she says. Then, after a brief pause, "and a meat pie." The pause registers. Not because it feels rehearsed, but because it feels deliberate. The shopkeeper hesitates. He has served the Beaumont children many times before. He knows what they usually buy. Pasties, yes. A meat pie, no. He glances at Jane again, searching for a cue that does not come. "A meat pie?" he asks, lightly. Jane nods. Yes. She does not look back at the man waiting outside. She does not explain the choice. She reaches into her pocket and places a 1-pound note on the counter. The shopkeeper freezes for a fraction of a second. The amount is wrong. Nancy Beaumont has never given the children that much money. He knows this because he has made change for them before. 6 shillings and 6 pence has been the routine. Enough for bus fare and lunch. Not a pound. "Right," he says finally, taking the note. He breaks it, counts out the change, and slides the food across the counter. Jane gathers it carefully, making sure Arnna and Grant are beside her before turning toward the door. The bell rings again as they leave. Outside, the man waits. No one speaks about the money. No one asks where it came from. The transaction ends without comment, but it does not disappear. It stays with the shopkeeper. He will remember it later, not because of what happened in the shop, but because of what happened after. The group continues along Jetty Road. The children carry the food. The man walks with them at an even pace. He does not rush them. He does not pull them along. The street remains busy enough that no one watches them for long. Somewhere along the way, the group separates. The exact moment cannot be fixed with certainty. Different witnesses place it differently. What matters is not the separation itself, but the uncertainty it creates. From this point forward, every sighting carries an asterisk. At approximately 2:55 p.m., a postman walking his route along Jetty Road notices 3 familiar faces. He knows the Beaumont children well. He has seen them many times in this neighborhood. They are not hard to recognize. They are walking together. Jane in the middle, Arnna and Grant on either side. They are holding hands. The postman slows. "Hello," he says. Jane looks up and smiles. Arnna laughs at something Grant says. Grant keeps walking, tugging lightly at Jane's hand. "Off back home?" the postman asks. "Yes," Jane says. They continue walking. They do not hurry. They do not look around. They do not appear worried about the time. The postman keeps walking too. The moment passes as unremarkable. At the time, it does not feel like something that needs to be reported. Children walking home together is not unusual. Children being late is not unusual. Nothing about the scene suggests urgency. Later, when the children do not come home, the postman's memory sharpens. He recalls the details more clearly. The holding of hands, the laughter, the direction they were walking. He contacts police and gives a statement. Police note the time carefully. 2:55 p.m. The detail causes immediate confusion. By that time, the children should have already been home. They were expected on the noon bus. Even the 2 p.m. bus would have been late. Why would they still be walking, unhurried, nearly an hour after that? 2 days later, the postman contacts police again. His certainty has weakened. "I think I might have seen them in the morning," he says. Not the afternoon. The statement shifts. The time changes. The reliability of the sighting fractures. Investigators note the revision. The timeline loosens further. Other reported sightings begin to surface. A woman believes she saw the children near the beach again. A man recalls seeing them with an adult. Another claims they were alone. Each report sounds plausible on its own. Together, they refuse to align. What investigators are left with is a sequence that does not behave the way it should. The children are seen leaving the beach around 12:15. They are seen buying food with money they should not have. They are possibly seen walking home at 2:55. Then the trail dissolves. The bakery purchase becomes more significant as the hours pass. Nancy Beaumont had given the children 6 shillings and 6 pence, enough for bus fare and lunch, not enough for a £1 purchase. The conclusion becomes difficult to avoid. Someone else provided the money. The choice of food matters too. The children had never bought a meat pie before. The shopkeeper is certain of that. The detail suggests influence, suggests direction, suggests that the decision did not originate with the children alone. The airline bag, seen later by Daphne Gregory, adds another layer. The bag looks like one owned by Jane. It is being carried by the man. Adults often carry children's belongings, but the image lingers because it implies preparation, movement, a reason to carry more than towels and food. By the end of the afternoon, investigators will be forced to accept that the timeline no longer flows forward cleanly. It doubles back on itself. Witnesses revise their memories. Times shift. Certainty erodes. At this stage, no one knows which sighting represents the last true moment. No one can say with confidence when the children were last seen together, or whether they were ever truly alone after leaving the beach. What remains solid are a few fixed points. The children left home that morning. They arrived safely at Glenelg. They were seen with a man. They bought food with money they did not have. After that, the story breaks into fragments. The fracture does not announce itself loudly. It happens quietly, through small contradictions, through ordinary details that refuse to line up, through the realization that daylight sightings do not guarantee clarity. By the time the investigation turns toward urgency, the day has already splintered beyond repair. And from this point forward, every attempt to reconstruct what happened will begin with a question that has no stable answer. Which moment was the last moment that mattered? The noon bus stops where it always stops. Its arrival is unremarkable. The doors open. Passengers step down. The driver glances ahead, waiting for movement that does not come. No children appear. At 109 Harding Street, Nancy Beaumont stands near the front window. She does not look down the street immediately. The children have returned late before, though rarely. Glenelg is familiar territory. Nothing in the morning suggested deviation from routine. She waits. The 2 o'clock bus follows the same pattern. Doors open, doors close. The bus pulls away, leaving behind the same empty stretch of pavement. This time, Nancy checks the clock. The space between expectation and reality lengthens enough to demand attention. When Jim Beaumont returns home earlier than scheduled, the absence becomes shared. He sets his bag down and listens as Nancy explains what has not happened. They didn't get on the noon bus, she says. Jim looks at the clock. He does not sit down. They'll still be there, he says. Probably didn't want to leave. The assumption is practical, not hopeful. Glenelg Beach has always been a place where time slips easily. Children lose track of hours without consequence. Jim reaches for his keys before the sentence finishes. At the beach, the environment has already shifted. The crowds are thinning. Towels are folded. Umbrellas tilt as families prepare to leave. Jim walks the shoreline first, scanning faces methodically rather than calling out names. He moves to Collie Reserve, then back again. He asks questions without urgency, but the pattern repeats. 3 kids, he says. 2 girls and a boy. Some people pause. Others shake their heads immediately. The answers do not linger. Inside Wenzel's bakery, the shopkeeper recognizes Jim as soon as he speaks. The connection forms quickly. Yes, the shopkeeper says. Jane was here. What time? Jim asks. Late morning, the shopkeeper replies. Around lunch. Were they alone? The shopkeeper hesitates. No. The answer lands heavier than the rest. Jim does not ask who they were with. He turns and leaves. Back at Harding Street, the daylight has begun to soften. Nancy is still waiting where she was earlier. Jim tells her what he has learned. The details do not align cleanly, but they do not argue yet. They divide the neighborhood between them and search. Friends' houses, familiar stops, routes the children sometimes take. Each door opens to the same response. No one has seen them. No one knows where they are. By the time they reach Glenelg Police Station at approximately 5:30 p.m., the case has already begun to change shape. What starts as a late return is now several hours unaccounted for. The constable at the desk listens carefully, but the response remains procedural. They're probably nearby, he says. Kids lose track of time. Nancy nods without agreeing. Jim remains standing. Police initiate a search based on proximity. The assumption is simple. Children this young have limited range. Officers begin with the beach, then expand outward. The sandhills are checked. The waterline is watched closely. Buildings near the beach are entered. Rail lines are monitored. Roads leading out of the area are noted. The airport is notified quietly, without urgency, but with awareness. This phase of the investigation operates under a model of misadventure, not crime. The working theories do not include deliberate harm. The tone remains calm. That tone does not survive the night. By the next morning, the absence has stretched beyond explanation. Media coverage expands rapidly. Radio stations interrupt programming. Newspapers print photographs. Within 24 hours, the case is national. The shift in language is immediate and consequential. On January 29th, the Adelaide Sunday Mail runs a headline that reframes the entire investigation. Sex crime now feared. The phrase does not cite evidence. It does not explain reasoning. It names a fear and releases it into public consciousness. Police do not endorse the language publicly, but the investigation adjusts nonetheless. The reward is announced, £250. The amount reflects uncertainty, not confidence. It is offered without ceremony. Tips begin arriving faster than they can be processed. Sightings, hearsay, impressions. Police log each one. Most are inconsistent. Many contradict each other. The volume itself becomes a problem. One report, however, carries enough specificity to demand action. A woman tells police she spoke with 3 children near the Padawalonga boat haven at around 7 p.m. on the day of the disappearance. The description matches. The time is late. The location is precise. Police do not dismiss it. On January 29th, the boat haven is drained. The decision signals a change in posture. This is no longer a search assuming survival. Cadets and emergency operations personnel comb through the exposed area methodically. The process is slow. The water recedes, inch by inch. Nothing is found. The absence of evidence does not restore earlier assumptions. It removes them. The optimism that framed the first hours dissolves into something heavier. The case is no longer about where the children might have wandered. It is about how 3 children could leave a public beach, be seen by multiple witnesses, and still vanish without trace. At Harding Street, the house becomes a place of suspended motion. Lights remain on at night. The phone rings frequently. Nancy answers every call. Yes, she says when descriptions match. No, when they do not. The calls blur together. Some come from people who mean well. Others come from those who believe they have something important. None bring resolution. For investigators, the problem becomes structural. The early assumption that the children were nearby has already cost time. Witness accounts now span hours and locations that no longer form a single path. The daylight that once suggested safety now complicates reconstruction. Too many people, too many movements, too many gaps. By the end of the first week, Glenelg Beach has been searched thoroughly. Every obvious explanation has been tested and found insufficient. What remains is a disappearance that does not behave the way disappearances are expected to behave. 3 children left together. They were seen repeatedly. They interacted normally. They did not signal distress. And yet, by nightfall, they were gone. The investigation does not stop. It accelerates. But the foundation has already shifted. The case has moved from local concern to national anxiety. And with that shift comes pressure, speculation, and the risk of following the wrong certainty too quickly. The question that now dominates is no longer whether the children will return on their own. It is whether the truth is still reachable at all. As the investigation drags into its 2nd year, something subtle changes in the public space around the Beaumont case. The absence of answers creates a vacuum, and that vacuum does not remain empty for long. Where evidence cannot advance the case, interpretation begins to fill the gap. By late 1966, the disappearance has already achieved international visibility. The names of the children are known well beyond South Australia. Their photographs circulate repeatedly. For the public, repetition creates familiarity. For investigators, repetition without progress creates pressure. It is within this environment that Gerard Croizet arrives. Croizet is a Dutch psychic whose reputation precedes him. He is not invited quietly. His arrival is announced. The press treats it as a development, rather than a diversion. Cameras follow him as he walks, sites already searched by police. The framing is immediate and unambiguous. If conventional methods have failed, something unconventional must be tried. Croizet speaks with certainty. He does not hedge. He identifies a location near a warehouse close to the Beaumont home. He describes the remains of an old brick kiln. He says the children are buried there. The specificity matters. It gives the claim weight it does not earn. A vague statement could be dismissed. A precise one demands response. Property owners resist at first. The claim is extraordinary. No physical evidence supports it. But public pressure grows. Media attention escalates. Donations begin to accumulate. Eventually, more than 40,000 Australian dollars are raised to fund demolition and excavation. The building comes down. The ground is opened. Nothing is found. No remains. No personal effects. No trace that connects the site to the Beaumont children in any way. The excavation closes, but the damage does not reverse. The psychic intervention alters the emotional economy of the case. For the first time since the disappearance, certainty has been offered, even if briefly, and then taken away. Hope rises sharply and collapses just as fast. Croizet's narrative does not stabilize. His claims shift from day to day. New locations are suggested. New explanations appear. Each adjustment erodes credibility, but by then the effect has already set in. The public has seen what belief looks like when it masquerades as progress. Years pass. The investigation continues, but now it operates under an additional burden. Every unverified lead is measured not only against evidence, but against the memory of that false certainty. In 1996, the warehouse site is revisited during partial demolition. Owners allow a full search. Once again, the ground yields nothing. The absence confirms what had already been suggested years earlier, but confirmation does not restore what was lost. Time has passed. Expectations have shifted. Around 2 years after the disappearance, the Beaumont household receives mail that interrupts the long stretch of silence. 2 letters arrive separately. One is purportedly written by Jane, the other by a man who claims to be keeping the children. The envelopes bear a Dandenong, Victoria postmark. The content is restrained. The tone is calm. The letter attributed to Jane describes a life that is not unpleasant. The children are said to be together. They are alive. The man refers to himself simply as the man. The second letter states that he has appointed himself guardian of the children. He claims to be willing to return them. A meeting place is named. Nancy reads the letters carefully. The handwriting resembles Jane's. Certain phrasing feels familiar. The possibility that the letters are genuine cannot be dismissed immediately. Police compare the writing to samples they already have. At that time, they conclude that authenticity is plausible. The effect is immediate and destabilizing. For the first time in years, the possibility of reunion appears concrete, not abstract, not hypothetical, scheduled. Nancy and Jim drive to the designated meeting place. A detective follows at a distance, deliberately disguised. They wait. No one arrives. Time passes. The space remains empty. Days later, a third letter arrives. This one claims that the man noticed the detective. It states that trust has been broken. The decision has been made to keep the children permanently. There will be no further contact. No additional letters follow. The silence that returns is heavier than the one that preceded it. The letters did not simply fail to deliver answers. They created a narrative, invited participation, and then withdrew it. Hope is not just raised and lost. It is manipulated. At the time, there is no definitive way to disprove the letters. They remain part of the file, unresolved, their origin unknown. The possibility that the children are alive but hidden continues to exist, alongside the possibility that the letters are a cruel fabrication. In 1992, advances in forensic examination allow the letters to be reanalyzed. Fingerprint technology has improved. The handwriting is reassessed with new standards. The conclusion is clear. The letters are a hoax. The author is identified as a 41-year-old man who had been a teenager at the time he wrote them. He describes the act as a joke. No charges are laid. Too much time has passed. The revelation does not close the wound. It reframes it. What had once been a fragile hope becomes evidence of exploitation. The Beaumont family had not merely waited, they had been targeted. By this point, the case carries layers of distortion that are difficult to separate from the core facts. Psychic claims, fabricated correspondence, public speculation that alternates between certainty and despair. Each false lead leaves residue behind, altering how subsequent information is received. For investigators, the challenge becomes one of filtration rather than discovery. Leads must be evaluated not only for plausibility, but for motive why someone might want to insert themselves into a case defined by absence. For Nancy and Jim, the cost is cumulative. They continue to cooperate with every new avenue presented to them. Cult theories, sightings in other states, claims of secret communities, each is considered seriously, not because it is convincing, but because refusal feels premature. The house at Harding Street remains occupied. Lights are kept on. The idea that the children might return unannounced is never fully abandoned. Nancy states more than once that it would be unbearable for the children to come home and find no one waiting. The investigation does not end here. But from this point forward, it carries an added burden: the recognition that false hope can be as damaging as no hope at all. The Beaumont case now exists in two parallel realities, one defined by evidence and procedure, the other by belief, suggestion, and manipulation. The task ahead is no longer just to find the truth, but to separate it from the stories that have grown around its absence. And that separation will prove far more difficult than anyone anticipated. As the years pass, the Beaumont case accumulates something it did not lack in the beginning: names. Each new suspect enters the file carrying the promise of resolution, and each leaves behind a different kind of uncertainty. The investigation no longer struggles to generate leads. It struggles to weigh them. The first figure to dominate this phase is Bevan Spencer von Einem. Von Einem is already known to police. In 1984, he is sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Richard Kelvin, the teenage son of an Adelaide newsreader. The case establishes him as capable of extreme violence. Prosecutors state publicly that they believe he had accomplices and may have been involved in other murders. The suggestion opens doors investigators had not previously been able to enter. Attention turns back to the Beaumont disappearance. Von Einem bears a resemblance to the identikit drawings created from witness descriptions in 1966. He is tall. His facial structure aligns closely enough to prompt comparison. More importantly, he is known to have frequented Glenelg Beach. Witnesses describe him as preoccupied with children. He is reported to have loitered near changing rooms, watching. An informant emerges during the Kelvin investigation, identified only as Mr. B. He has provided reliable information before. Investigators listen carefully when he speaks again. According to Mr. B, von Einem once described taking 3 children from a beach years earlier. He claimed to have taken them home to conduct experiments. He spoke of surgery, of connecting bodies, of one child dying during the process, followed by the killing of the remaining 2. He said the bodies were dumped in bushland south of Adelaide. The account is graphic, specific, disturbing. It is also inconsistent. Certain elements align with known details, others do not. The Beaumont children were younger than von Einem's confirmed victim profile. Von Einem was in his early 20s in 1966, while witnesses described a man in his mid to late 30s. Such shifts in victim age and method are unusual in serial offenders, though not impossible. Police take the information seriously but cautiously. Mr. B is regarded as generally reliable, but not infallible. Investigators compare his statements against known facts. Some fit, some do not. Von Einem refuses to cooperate. He neither confirms nor denies involvement. As of 2014, he is not ruled out. The case does not advance. Another name surfaces: Arthur Stanley Brown. Brown is charged in 1998 with the murders of Judith and Susan Mackay in Townsville, Queensland. The sisters had disappeared on their way to school and were later found strangled. Brown's appearance matches the Beaumont suspect descriptions closely. The resemblance is difficult to ignore. Brown's case collapses before trial. He is deemed unfit to stand trial due to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. He dies in 2002. Investigators search for evidence placing him in Adelaide in 1966. None is found. Employment records that might have clarified his movements are missing, possibly lost in the 1974 Brisbane floods. There is no proof he ever visited Adelaide at that time. Brown was 53 when the Beaumont children disappeared, older than the man witnesses described. The lead stalls. James Ryan O'Neill enters the narrative differently. He speaks. O'Neill is serving a life sentence for the murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania. Several acquaintances report that he claimed responsibility for the Beaumont disappearance. The claims surface intermittently, without corroboration. A former Victorian detective, Gordon Davey, spends 3 years speaking with O'Neill to gain his trust. When asked directly about the Beaumont children, O'Neill responds carefully. "I couldn't have done it," he says. "I was in Melbourne at that time, too." Davey presses him again later. O'Neill replies, "On legal advice, I'm not going to say where I was or when I was there." The responses are parsed closely. The absence of a direct denial attracts attention. O'Neill denies ever visiting Adelaide, but his work in the opal industry would have required travel through the city to reach Coober Pedy. The possibility remains open. South Australia police interview O'Neill. They eventually discount him as a suspect. The case remains unresolved. Derek Ernest Percy becomes a subject of interest after media reports suggest he may be connected to several unsolved child murders. Percy is already imprisoned for the murder of Yvonne Tuohy, having entered an insanity plea based on a psychological condition affecting memory. Percy indicates at one point that he believes he may have killed the Beaumont children, stating he was in the area at the time, but claims no recollection of doing so. Investigators are permitted to question him in relation to the case. Problems emerge quickly. Percy was 17 in 1966, significantly younger than the suspect described by witnesses. It is unclear whether he had access to a car, which investigators believe would have been necessary. Percy is imprisoned from 1969 until his death in 2013, eliminating him as a suspect in related cases such as the Adelaide Oval abductions. Again, the lead fades. Alan Anthony Munro enters the case through second-hand testimony. Alan Maxwell McIntyre tells police that a man he knew in 1966 came to his home with children's bodies in the boot of his car. McIntyre's children later state that Arnna's body was initially mistaken for that of a boy because of her short haircut. The man is later identified as Munro, a former scoutmaster and businessman. Munro pleads guilty to multiple child sex offenses dating back to the early 1960s. He is sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. In 2017, police receive a copy of a child's diary written in 1966, allegedly placing Munro near Glenelg Beach at the time of the disappearance. Munro had been investigated before and cleared. No direct evidence links him to the Beaumont children. The pattern repeats. Finally, Harry Phipps. Phipps is a wealthy local factory owner, a member of Adelaide's social elite. He lives within 300 meters of Glenelg Beach. He resembles the suspect described by witnesses. He is known to give out £1 notes freely. His estranged son claims he saw the Beaumont children in his father's yard on the day they disappeared. 2 other individuals state they were paid to dig a large hole in Phipps's factory yard that weekend. Excavations follow. Ground-penetrating radar identifies anomalies. Soil is removed. Bones are found, but they are animal remains. Nothing connects to the Beaumont children. The site is excavated again in 2018, then again in 2025. Each time, nothing is found. By this stage, the investigation is crowded with suspects, each compelling in isolation, none conclusive. Physical evidence is absent. Confessions are unreliable. Witness memories are decades old. The Beaumont case does not suffer from a lack of interest. It suffers from accumulation. Each new lead adds weight without adding direction. Investigators remain careful in their language. No suspect is named publicly as responsible. Files remain open. The case resists closure not because no one has looked hard enough, but because the truth refuses to settle around a single narrative. What remains is a cold case defined not by silence, but by noise. Names, theories, excavations, statements, all circling the same absence, and with each dead end, the question sharpens rather than fades. How many answers can a case hold before it becomes harder to recognize the right one? As weeks turn into months, the physical search dissolves into routine. The forest returns to itself. The road resumes its ordinary traffic. What remains active is not movement, but record-keeping. Files are reviewed, reordered, and stored. Marjorie West's name no longer moves through daily briefings, but it does not disappear from them either. The case remains open. In the immediate years that follow, law enforcement revisits familiar ground without expectation of discovery. Witnesses are recontacted. Descriptions are repeated. Nothing sharpens with time. Memories soften instead, their edges worn down by repetition and doubt. For the West family, time behaves differently. Shirley and Cecilia remain in Bradford. They do not move away from 5 Cornan Street. The house keeps its structure. Meals continue. Silence stretches longer between conversations. Cecilia maintains habits that do not change. She sets places at the table, then corrects herself. She keeps Marjorie's belongings where they were. When asked why, she does not explain. She might need them, she says once, without elaboration. Shirley's routines shift more visibly. He works when work is available. He drinks more than he did before. People notice but do not comment. In this town, grief is recognized through distance rather than confrontation. Dorothea grows older, carrying a responsibility she was never assigned formally, but never releases. She is careful in how she speaks about her sister. She does not dramatize the moment of separation. When asked, she answers plainly. "I stepped away," she says. "I came back." She was gone. She does not add anything else. Alan grows up in the shadow of a name that is spoken less often but never forgotten. He remembers fragments rather than events. He remembers adults standing close together, voices low. He remembers the road. As decades pass, the case drifts from active investigation into historical record. New generations hear it differently. To some, it becomes a cautionary tale about the forest. To others, a warning about roads and strangers. The facts remain the same. The meanings assigned to them multiply. By the mid-20th century, America's understanding of child disappearance changes. Stories emerge from other states. Patterns are named. Crimes that once seemed isolated are recognized as part of larger structures. The Marjorie West case is revisited under these new frameworks, not by original investigators, but by those looking backward. One such framework centers on organized child trafficking. The name Georgia Tann enters public consciousness decades after Marjorie vanished. Her operation in Tennessee, disguised as child welfare work, becomes known as one of the largest illegal adoption networks in American history. Children taken from parks, roadsides, and homes. Identities altered. Records falsified. Lives rewritten. The parallels are not exact, but they are tempting. Marjorie's age, her appearance, the proximity to a major north-south route. Writers and researchers begin to place her case alongside others, not as proof, but as possibility. The idea does not originate with evidence from 1938. It grows from context discovered later. Law enforcement never confirms a connection. No document from the Tennessee Children's Home Society names Marjorie West. No adoption record surfaces. The theory remains external to the case file, influential in public imagination but unsupported by forensic linkage. Still, it persists, because it offers structure where silence dominates. In the late 1990s, renewed interest brings the case back into local conversation. The internet allows stories to circulate beyond geography. One researcher in particular, Harold Thomas Bud Beck, dedicates years to the question of what happened to Marjorie West. Beck approaches the case not as an officer, but as a historian and investigator working independently. If you follow long-form investigative storytelling built from records, timelines, and unresolved questions, consider subscribing to the channel. These cases are examined carefully, without shortcuts. If this story raised questions for you, the comment section remains open, and sharing helps keep these cases visible.